Hello and welcome to the 7th annual Latinx Games Festival. My name is Jason Vega. I'm the executive director and founder of Latinx Games Festival. And I'm here doing a one-on-one interview with someone that I've been following for a while. I've seen them on the internet announcing really cool things that they've done over their career, which is always really fascinating to me because they have a wide, diverse set of skills that I'm really curious to find out more about what went into their career. And yeah, just sort of like, want to pick your mind. So Andrea, welcome to the 7th annual Latinx Games Festival. If you can, tell me and the audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what do you do in the gaming world?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for reaching out. I was like, oh my God, you thought of me. Because it's one of those where you're just doing things. You don't realize kind of in retrospective how much you've done until people reach out. So that's pretty cool. So my name is Andrea Saravia Pérez. I am a narrative designer and game designer, specializing in just kind of uplifting developers through either mentoring or just kind of building communities to make sure that we can share as many resources about this very unique discipline as possible. I've worked on the award-nominated Civilization VII. So last night was pretty fun to see Civ on the in the big screen. A few other projects that I've worked with a couple of indie studios, ranging from Solar Vault, Rainbow Unicorn Games, and so many others. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Happy to have you. And yeah, obviously you've been working on a lot of really cool projects. Civ 7. I have a friend of mine. I'll name drop him. His name is Jose Rojas. He showed me hours logged in. I think the most hours ever logged into a game was about 250, which is a lot for me, but I think his was probably pushing 800 hours. The last time I checked, he really loves Civ. So he obviously, a lot of people, it's a legendary franchise, but outside of newer games, I'm really curious about what were some of your favorite games that you played growing up?
Definitely Little Big Planet was one of my favorites. So I grew up with my younger brothers. I have two twin brothers, Felipe and Gabriel. And so a lot of multiplayer games, which the funny thing about that is that I'm now teaching game design for multiplayer games. So that's, a very full circle moment. Other games that we loved were Sonic Heroes. I confess that Sonic Heroes, my brothers were probably one or two, so I would give them a controller that's not plugged in, and then I would be the only one playing, and then I'd be like, "Look, you're playing as Sonic." He was not. It was all me, but he would think that he was playing as Sonic. And let's see, so Little Big Planet, Sonic Heroes. I'd say that League of Legends was also pretty present throughout as especially in Semana Santa, where it was just a week-long break where we would just kind of be playing League. And I don't know, I like the sense of mastery that those games kind of give you with the progression and the systems. So those are a few I can think of. Did you also have any multiplayer games that you played in when you were younger?
So there was this, oh dear, aging myself. There was this game called Warlords for the Atari 2600. Now, it was my parents' hand-me-down. So I'm in my early 40s. So I grew up with Atari. So Warlords require this paddle controller. And it was 4 players. And basically it was like Pong, where you'd have your bases. You had 4 bases and a little paddle that you had to move the little paddle controller to protect your base. And then you press the one button. If you got the ball, you grab it, move over to whatever base you wanted to shoot at, let it go. So that was the game. That was my first multiplayer game, was Warlords. Beyond that, it was always NES 2-player games. And for massively multiplayer, dipped my toe into EverQuest for a moment, but I was more about Unreal Tournament and
Yeah.
Quake 3 back in the late 90s. I was rocking my Voodoo 2 graphics card, rest in peace, with a Pentium, for Pentium 2 433 or something, something ridiculous that would not, I don't even think like a Nokia flip phone from like 2000 can,
No, the Nokia.
like that's probably comparable to what I was using back in like 98, but that was about it really. I mean, those are some of my like fave gamer moments were like early like 3D multiplayer. They really stood out for me with like mods and everything. Before that, it was like Doom, but I didn't play multiplayer with that. Things weren't like the internet infrastructure wasn't as sophisticated for that. But you know, a lot of these moments really like stood out to me. Do you remember the first moment in a game that really like grabbed you and made an imprint on you?
Well, I remember the first game I played. It's a game I probably shouldn't have played. It was GTA because I thought it was a racing game. I was 4 years old, and my dad and my uncle left the console unattended. But something that like I guess like that gripped me probably um mm, and again, it's one of those where it's like it grips you because you're young and you're kind of like exposed to it, but like in hindsight, you're just like, it's. I think that when I realized just how many characters League of Legends had, and then a couple of cinematics in Sonic Unleashed, where it was just kind of like because I had grown with kind of like, you go into like a Green Hill Zone and you're just running around, like it's very bright, and then it's like they kind of had this like darker theme with that installment that I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it was probably like one of my favorite Wii titles, Sonic Unleashed, Sonic and the Dark, Sonic and the Seven Rings. What else? Oh, Detroit Become Human. Like years later, it was just their use of like branching narrative and how they were able to like explore like really complex subjects while still kind of like um sending like a very clear message that I think everybody needed during those years. I really kind of liked how games can really have that social impact and that kind of like mark that as a medium, like because we can make movies or like write about awful things that are happening and we can raise awareness. But if I can make a game where you as a player are experiencing like the awful reality that other people are experiencing, I feel like that empathy that we can bring, that bridge, is so powerful as a medium that yeah, it's why I really like kind of like the possibilities and like the change that as an industry we can bring.
I mean, especially with like Detroit, I think this was one of those games where like sort of like my niece
Mhm.
played the game multiple times and she would tell me about it. And I was familiar with like I think I played not think I know I played Heavy Rain. I think it might have come out before another game, Beyond Two Souls, I believe. Something like
Yeah.
that studio does a lot of really like sometimes the writing gets a little like memed out on the internet, but if you like just like step back for a bit and realize like the scope of the game, the amount of choices and the themes that are covered, you start to see the conversation of what they're dissecting in those games bubble up like years later. So I actually
Mhm.
really have a lot of respect for those games. I remember seeing like it was like a not even a vertical slice. It was just like probably like a pitch demo that they were showing Sony about the game back in like 2011, 2012, or the main character is being assembled on an assembly line and she has like a freak out moment where she's
Yeah.
like, what is going on? Like, I'm alive. And they're like, whoa, she's alive. You gotta kill her, like, you gotta break it down. And she's like, no, don't do that. So I remember seeing that, even like getting goosebumps. I was like, wow, like it was just like at a great time from a console's perspective. I believe the PS4 was right around the corner, about a year or two away. Xbox One, like we're going to this really big shift, and I was like, man, gaming is just so cool, and the stories you can tell with narrative are so deep and endless. I was too in awe. So actually, I have like not even low key. I have a lot of respect for those games, and I'm happy you brought them up because, like I said, sometimes the writing gets a bit memed out. But a little bit on the GTA front, by the way. That is like, so what was it? GTA? Do you know which one? Was it like GTA 3, Vice City? I mean, was it like a PS2 GTA game?
We're
Or like
talking
that era?
2004. Yeah, to PS1.
Okay, so yeah, so like GTA, like discovering GTA, I could see why you would think it's a racing game. I mean, you're in a car, you're driving around.
And like
But
there's like
that's
stars, and so it's like, am I
yeah.
doing good? The more stars I have, does that mean that I'm like winning? And it's like, well, kind of.
However you want to define winning. There are a lot of people that were winning when they got max stars. But and that's actually a beautiful game, beautiful thing about GTA 2. You don't actually have to go through any of the missions. I mean, the story is fun and great, and obviously GTA 5 is maybe one of the most influential, important pieces of media released within the last like 20 years. You know, it's still standing tall after like, I don't know, it's been out for like 12, 13 years, right? It's still killing it. We're just getting around to GTA 6. So like those games are great from a narrative perspective, but you can also just drive around. And back in the day, I would just like make it rain tanks and like crush other vehicles. Like this is cathartic. This is great. And then like, oh yeah, a mission, you know? So like the open world nature of those games were great. Now you just see that like it just bled into like every genre and everything's essentially open. But that's really cool. I mean, what games do you like personally enjoy now? Like what do you dig now?
I really enjoy fighting games now. And I've always enjoyed rhythm games. So like I think my actually one of my first fighting games was, I think, Bloody Roar 3. And ever since then, like just Tekken, Street Fighter, we were a smash, like we would play Smash consistently as a family. Even though I'm not the best, I just kind of like enjoy like just as you might have seen, like I do a lot of things, and so sometimes I don't have the time to dedicate to like a 50-hour, 30-hour campaign single player game. So instead I like to just kind of like have those kind of like episodic um like choice driven games. So like, you know, Dispatch, I really enjoy Dispatch. Games like yeah well, the rhythm based games like in arcades, because it's like, you know, you put in the token, and then it's like, you know, you play for like 3 minutes, get a little bit of cardio, and then you're out. So there was not DDR, there was a different one, Pump It Up Fiesta. When I was in Colombia, it was very popular. So it was interesting because it's, imagine like DDR, but then instead of just kind of like your J-pop and K-pop, you also have Daddy Yankee songs in the mix.
That's dope.
And so it's like, yeah, I mean, don't mind me a little bit of La Boom, but while I'm in the mall.
No, that sounds awesome. Rhythm games, I feel like they had their time in the sun. They were great when they were around. And I feel like once we went to the Guitar Hero route and then Rock Band, everyone had like plastic fake guitars cramming up their home. And I feel like that's probably what killed her. Like, I can't buy plastic fake crap anymore. I'm not doing this. But I actually loved that time. I would, the first time I played like DDR specifically was at an anime convention. It was my first anime convention. It was at Katsucon in like 98 or 99. So it was on a, sorry, Sony, I think it was on a modded PlayStation 1, because there was the games had a little bit of Sharpie written on the disc, and it was like a stack of like DDR games. And I just remember playing that thinking like, oh, I can't wait to like play all my games this way. And no thanks. But dancing, you know, like and like vibing with the beat, getting in there for like a couple of minutes, I think is I really would love to see someone dive into more like, hey, pick this up, and like after a minute or two you're good. Like not just even rhythm games, but like so I like WarioWare, the game with a bunch of micro games that are games like that, like back in the day.
Have you played Bundle of Joy?
No, I haven't.
So Bundle of Joy has been featured a couple of times in The Guardian. It was made, so I took a narrative design course a couple of years back, and one of the people in my cohort, Nicholas, started his own studio. And so it's like WarioWare, but then with like, parenting. So it's like these like mini games that he built on his own and go to the kind of like with the story of like, what it's like being a parent, where like you're doing all of these activities. And so it's a very well done game in my opinion. I can send you the link if you'd like.
Yeah, no, that'll be great. Like after this, I'd love to check it out because I love that style of game. There was another game kind of like WarioWare, like where it's a bunch of mini games. It's called Feel the Magic,
Mm,
where it was a guy who's like had a crush on a girl, classic guy girl story, and she's getting into all sorts of trouble. She's getting like hurt and like falling into like, I don't know, like wells, and bad guys are trying to get, I don't know. It's a Sega game released. It was a launch title for the Nintendo DS back in 2005. And it was taking advantage of all the new DS features. So, the DS introduced the second screen, the touch screen, and it had a mic like a lot of these controllers do now, where you can like blow in and it'll do something. So sorry, spoilers for like a 20-year-old game that you can beat in 30 minutes. But at the end, she gets so hurt that you have to perform CPR on her. I remember thinking this is like the coolest thing. I'd take the stylus and like 1, 2, 3 with her heart, and I had to blow air into her lungs. So I have to blow into the DS. So the end boss is you like bringing her back to life with CPR. And I just love different ways of play. And I get excited when I talk to people like you because, from a narrative perspective, you can really shape what that game could be, not just from like, like girl falls in a well and you have to save her life, but like, really creating a narrative where, if you really wanted to, you could even like guide the team in your direction, pull them in your direction, and have a really like great impact on gameplay. I get really excited speaking with narrative designers because it's not like a linear role. Actually, would you mind talking about that? Because you've done narrative design for a few companies, obviously, like we mentioned it earlier, and it's not like you've done a lot of great stuff. But
yeah.
you talk a little bit about your work on Civ 7.
Yeah, so if it's okay before we kind of like dive in, because I think that you brought up a very interesting point about narrative, just kind of like a sort of, which is like that my job has never been like the same no matter the company that I've been at, where it's like um a narrative designer in Firaxis may have a completely different role than a narrative designer in CD Project Red. Right, where it's like it's a discipline where there's not that much standardization. It's more so like what are the needs of the game story that we're trying to fill out. So I've worked in games where like I was the only narrative designer. In Civ 7 we had, while I was there, I think we had 11 or so people credited total, but we had a pretty robust narrative team, I'd say. So the way that I would kind of like approach it is just starting my day with like the JSTOR database and doing a lot of research on just kind of like different civilizations or like characters across history that I felt like hadn't been given a spotlight, and using kind of like the systems in place to see like how can we bring this to life in a way that's not me slapping a bunch of text in like the page, right, where it's like, in my opinion, the more succinct and concise a story is, the better. I feel like with games, less is more with narrative, in that if you're experiencing the story, if you're like it's an experience, right, then you don't really need to be like, reading for like 3 minutes, like, text-based stuff, unless you're playing a text-based strategy, of course. But yeah, that was pretty much kind of like what I did with Civ, was just kind of like working on a different couple of features, making sure there was like stories for the content that was needed. So it really changed week by week.
So, you know, with Civ, obviously there's a lot of research has to go into that. Like, a lot of historical research, and you know, it is obviously you can play around with history a bit, but like you also have to ground it and make sure you stay true to it. It seems like a lot of your history is like there's a lot of historical research that goes into what you do, and then as a narrative designer you have to shape that. Like how do you ensure, like for example with like Rainbow Unicorn games, right? Like how do you ensure the narrative direction stays true to the authenticity of history, right, while still building something new, fresh, and imaginative?
Well, first it's identifying like in this specific project, like there's kind of like a spectrum when it comes to navigating historic like anything that's derived from history. Like there's some projects that will want it to be like a carbon copy of what was actually happening in that time period. Others are like it is loosely inspired, and so we want to kind of like take a little bit more liberty, right? So for Rainbow Unicorn games, what I can say is that we identified what we liked about like what we wanted to see more of, like where it's like if you wanted to see like more diverse casts in kind of like these fantastical romantic settings, right, like Regency era inspired, then how can we make it so that, because let's face it, like Regency era had a couple of unpleasant things happening, right, when you're looking at those centuries. So it's if we are rooted by kind of like enjoying certain pillars in like these like values in the company, how can we marry them with kind of like what we liked about that era, like the fashion, the dresses, kind of the um the politics of it sometimes, right, where it's like how can we build a world that's inspired by history but still champions kind of like the modern values of the company, right? So it's always like an ongoing balance, but again, like every project's different, where like there's some that wanted to be like very accurate, and then there's some where it's like it's loosely inspired by history, but history can have a lot of problematic things, so let's try to kind of like have like almost like Frankenstein it in a way, right?
Yeah, that, I mean, it sounds like a tall order, because like when you're working with a smaller studio, obviously there's a bit more flexibility and leeway. Maybe out of necessity, right? Like you got to own this, help us like create
Yeah.
this world where on a Civ, like, and I don't want to speak for you, I'm not gonna say like narrative design by committee, but you're working with like a team, an established IP, right, where there's expectations and people need it to be a certain way. So it just even goes back to what we were saying before, and what I know speaking with so many narrative designers, that like if you were to look at the resume, if you were to line up 10 narrative designers and look at what they did for each game that they worked on, you would get a different description for
Mhm.
each company, each game, and each designer. And I think it's so beautiful because gaming is such a, it's a new industry, it's a new canvas, it's a new, it's this bizarre industry where it's creative, but it was born of like cold hard tech. So you have
Right.
like artists, creatives, and you have like tech pros, right? In this fusion, this hybrid. And when I think of a narrative designer, I feel like this is maybe one of the roles where I hope doesn't become defined, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
I want it to be fluid and flexible. What are your thoughts about narrative design in general, and maybe like the future of narrative design as we continue to move forward into like, always online, episodic, focus on big IP, or, this tiny indie studio like making its way through? Like, what do you think the world of narrative design is going to look like in the future?
Yeah, so that's a great question that I think also kind of like ties into my role, where I'm part of the committee of the IGDA's game writing special interest group. That was a mouthful, But so ultimately, I think that with narrative, to your point, like I think that it will remain fluid depending on the country as well. Like there are some stipulations on what a narrative designer is in the UK versus what a game writer is. And that's another thing that kind of like segues into almost like this spectrum of narrative where like you will have some people that are like very adept at writing, creating characters that are compelling, fleshing them out, writing for like transmedia and novels. And then you'll have more technical savvy narrative designers. You might have people that kind of like work in Unreal, like, they kind of like create like stories, barks, and then go and implement them. So very different skill sets, but ultimately like, you're trying to tell a story in an interactive medium. I think that what's next for like the discipline is we are trying to establish like a centralized documentation of resources of to kind of like have a landing page where in literature actually where like my major was in creative writing, we had what's called the canon. So it's these it's not like the Merriam-Webster definition of it, but in my opinion, it's the works of literature that kind of like define almost like the history of it. And we don't have that in games, right? We have titles that are just like, how have you not played GTA 5, right? Where it's like there's kind of like those titles, right? Where like they have a lot of impact. But we don't really have kind of like um documents or like just a centralized hub of information for this. And that means that we don't have standardized definitions of what a narrative designer is. So the effort is that we're trying to standardize a little bit of kind of like the information, have it be in one place, um, just to kind of make sure that there's just kind of like resources that other people can like reach out and like if they're interested in writing for games they're able to access it with ease, or if they've been writing in games for a while but they're not sure how other companies function, then we have these resources by like a plethora of like writers that can give a little bit of insight onto like what writing in their companies is like and what designing narratives, pitching beats, what that looks like. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I actually think that's I mean, ultimately it's we, like as an industry, we have to figure out what that looks like and make it easy for the next generation coming in to have reference points to understand what that can be. So like, like doing work for a special interest group like that, it's I mean, it's important, but it's also like a bit thankless, right? Because
Yeah.
but it's so necessary and so important. So I think the answer is, like we'll see, right? Because you got to collect all these things and kind of create like a general knowledge base of what this can look like. And ultimately, I think, as a veteran of narrative design, you know, you're able to use your experience as a reference point, as a template for those that are coming behind you, right? So like, if you're laying down the foundation and bricks, someone's going to lay over the cement, right? So like, I and thank you for like mentioning your work with the SIG, with the special interest group, because I feel like I said before, they're so necessary, but it's a bit thankless, but the industry improves and becomes better for it. It does sound like it will be a lot of work that will take a lot of great, incredible, smart people putting in a lot of hours to figure that out over a long period of time. And with narrative design being this really just this fluid role, I wish you the best of luck. And I'm actually looking forward. I will have to create a calendar reminder to check in to see where we're at, because like I said, I know a lot of folks that work within like the IGDA SIGs, and they're behind the scenes. You don't see them, but the industry benefits from their work, right? So thank you for putting in that work for the future. It's absolutely necessary. I mean, and with that, and I know we're maybe bouncing around the timeline of your career here, but I am curious about a early career stint. You were an elementary school art teacher for a bit.
Yeah, so for a very small short amount of time, but essentially there was a demand for a very specific class to be taught. Something that I'm not public about as much is that I have been an artist for around oh my god, 11 years or so. And I was known in my hometown for my kind of like anime manga inspired style. And so there was a lot of daughters of my parents' friends who were interested in kind of like, can you teach me about that? And so the idea came up of just kind of like offering these workshops, just about what it was that these kids would be interested in. So they were interested in like chibi and like very cute styles. So I just kind of like created templates where ultimately, and it sounds strange to compare kind of like 9 through like 12-year-olds with like college students. But what I have been doing in all of my classes is I ask the students up front, what do you want to learn from this? Because I have never used logarithms or trigonometry in my life. That doesn't mean that it's a useless, thing to know, but more so that I want to make sure that what like they're paying for like a certain education, and I want to make sure that I can deliver a curriculum and educational content that aligns with like what their expectation of that class was going to be. And I was lucky that it did meet their expectations, and it was well received. And so a couple years later, like I was a friend from Fire is kind of like recommended me for like the University of Baltimore. And I was able to kind of like leverage kind of like those workshops and then me being a teaching assistant. Um, and now I just finished teaching my second semester at the university. So it's been a pretty fun journey, just kind of like mentoring the next generation.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing because like in your, in like in your career timeline, this was really early. But if we fast forward to the present, right? University of Baltimore. So like you built a whole curriculum for games for learning, right? So you're combining like in instructional design, educational technology, you're getting like hands-on with game engines with, with your students here. Creating milestones, project check-ins, all that stuff. Like, how do you balance teaching technical engine knowledge with the bigger picture, like pedagogy behind the course?
So games for learning and the multiplayer course that I taught, they were kind of like they were very project based. And so it's one of those where I understand that it's like in a academic professional setting. It felt like a giant game jam to me, where it's just kind of like I'm really good at kind of like research, as we have seen, diving into documentation. And so I had a couple of students last week reach out like, hey, we have this problem with Unity. Can you help? And I was like, well, let's take a look at it. And so um, my technical knowledge derives more so from being really good at understanding documentation and being able to break it down in a way that I'm able to explain to them, like, so this is what the documentation says. And they're already at a point in these classes where they can kind of like see what I found and come up with their own decisions, where it's like, I don't hold their hands, like step by step, like here's how you open up an Unreal project. Because at these are like 300 level courses as well. So like they've already had a fair bit of like that more technological pedagogy was kind of like done by my peers. I'm more so kind of like here, like, hey, you have a problem, here's the solution the internet says, and they're able to kind of like come up with kind of like their own decision or their own solution to that on their own. So that's been like pretty good to see in these past couple of classes.
So for your elementary school gig, you mentioned like chibi characters and everything like that. And that's a great way to like grab and keep their attention, right? And have them engaged. Is there anything that stood out recently with this current gig at the university that you had to maybe think of like, okay, how do I make a connection? Or is this just like a young group of like hungry minds ready to like dive into your knowledge?
Um, that's a good question. I think it's a mix. There's definitely times where it's one of those where teaching feels a lot like improv and comedy at times, where in college, I don't want to add to like the million things I've had. I did project management for a comedy club when I was doing a project management course. And so we learned a little bit of kind of like crowd work from the owner of that comedy club, right? Where it's like, how do you set up a joke? How do you structure it? The punchline. So more of like kind of like the theory behind it. And it's very, very similar to that, where it's like you are looking at Zoom and seeing like who's engaged, who's, coming into the chat. I did very regular pauses throughout my lectures so that I could kind of like get if anybody had like some questions, I didn't go through like 20 slides and then it's like, does anybody have any questions? And they don't even know where to start. So like regular check-ins throughout the content was something that I think kind of like helped. They're very, very ambitious in the best of ways on these students. And you can kind of like see where it's like, I even set up a Calendly where if anybody needed help with like their resume, their portfolio, they can just let me know. Since, I've kind of like had to like look over those before. And it's like a huge privilege because I'm aware of like some classes where students just kind of like they turn off their cameras and then they're just like doing whatever, something else. That has not been my experience. My classes have been like so eager to learn, full of active participants, and just like really, really engaged with the lectures. I even show GDC talks. And we even organized a school field trip to Baltimore to the new Game Your Future conference that started there. So seeing that they're not just like spending like a hour or 2 hours and a half, listening to me talk about games, but then taking on the initiative and being proactive and like going to events, connecting with their industry, going to like, see other developers in Baltimore and being able to like talk about their work has been so, so fun to see these past semesters.
So I'm totally getting like community builder vibes with you talking about teaching young minds, right? And there are moments in your career where you were fully immersed in community building and also like with social media. But I'm actually curious about like community for a moment. Can you and kind of bringing it back to the IGDA SIG? Can you describe your approach in community building where you uplift the writing community through the IGDA game writing SIG? Can you kind of break down what that looks like?
Absolutely. So, I mean, first of all, it's the SIG has a lot of history embedded into it. And it's a huge honor for me to be kind of like a part of kind of like that new wave of history. And with that, I've been able to kind of like connect both in a public setting, kind of like with like I organized a coffee chat in Baltimore for like, to connect with other writers and narrative designers. But then also just kind of like more one-on-ones, sending out like asking the community, what do you want to see more of? Because with narrative, oftentimes a lot of people just either don't really understand the discipline, but then also I think the irony is that like our whole thing is like that we are the storytellers, the writers, but we're not that good at advocating for ourselves sometimes. So I want to kind of like first open up the space, like what do you need for your writing to kind of like be championed in a project? Like to do you need more workshops on public speaking? Do you need more assistance kind of like on the technical side of things? Like what is it that the writing community needs? So by identifying the needs and then creating programming to kind of like meet that was something that I think like I'll definitely like first of all like it's not like just me, it's a team effort. And Creed and Sam from the committee recently finished a game jam, for example, that was in partnership with Arcweave, where we kind of like saw the need for just like, how do you show that you can be like a writer when like you don't really have interactive writing samples? There's people that want to break into narrative design but don't have a portfolio. We saw that need, and then Creed and Sam were able to organize a game jam for people to kind of like use a tool that companies like Netflix have worked with, in the past, collaborate with other people, and then have a project that they could not only like show on their portfolio, but then we had judges play through the entries. so that there was like very thorough feedback and even awards that were given to kind of like the recipients of like these game jams. So we're seeing that there's also kind of like the need for centralized documentation and just kind of like this almost like wikia of resources. We're seeing the need of just kind of like also just frankly jobs, to be like upfront with you. And it's one of those where um if I had infinite amounts of money, I would love to hire all of my writing friends who are kind of like looking for work. um and we are also kind of like, how do we have like regular resume reviews, portfolio reviews, so that people can have the material needed to kind of be able to put in their best shot when applying. But it's a constant work in progress. And you know, you mentioned that it's like a huge commitment in a couple of hours. So I'm dedicated to setting up forms and sending those out pretty soon to the members to see like, hey, you know, what do you need? And so once we have kind of like that concrete data, rather than me trying to like, you know, set up 500 Calendly appointments with like people, right? So that's kind of like what we're looking into them.
That's awesome. I mean, there's a lot of moments in your career, like I mentioned, that focuses on community. I guess if, you know, we're keeping it academic right now, like the Ringling College of Art and Design. So like you did their social media, or you were their community manager. So rumor has it that you grew their membership by like 1,200%. You're able to raise money, had major investment.
Yeah.
You founded the esports team. I mean, we're talking like, you know, you're investing in strategy and outreach. Like what were the approaches? Like what
It
directly
sounds like a
contributed to
lot
such
because
rapid
I
community
was
growth?
just in college. I was in college, and then I just got approached, and it was just like, hey, do you play Overwatch? Yes, I play Overwatch. Would you like to start this team? Like, I was so basically like Ringling had kind of like a gym, and so like the person heading that was like, we have a game art major, we have visual studies, like we have a virtual reality major, like we have game developers. Why don't we have an esports team? And so I had gone into, so Ringling also has like pre-college programs. So like before, like you can kind of like get a glimpse of what the college is like. And so I knew that we had a really talented like professional Smash player in Hans. So we were able to kind of like start different teams. So we had a League of Legends, we had Overwatch, we had Smash, and then after my tenure there, we got what was it? Rocket League and Valorant. Also Marvel Rivals, I believe. They have like as teams. Um I was just trying to kind of like keep an active social media where it's like I would go to like the practices, record, but really like ultimately like I feel like I was more of like a vessel, right? Where it's like I don't take full ownership or kind of like that. Like it was again like a collective effort, and we were by just kind of like creating a brand that was had like the elements of art school, but then also kind of like that edginess that you kind of like identify with esports, and just giving a spotlight and a platform to the players, to their like viral moments, and collaborating with kind of like animators, right? Because it's like we had that advantage of like being able to just go into engine, maybe like make some like funny videos with like the 3D models of the games. But yeah, pretty much just using that advantage of like having access to like, you know, artists, animators, game developers, and putting like their passion for the medium and for esports on social media, and keeping it active. I did articles. We were in the news as well. And then eventually that kind of like got the attention of some folks who were very generous, and they were able to invest kind of like $500,000 in a lounge. Now, unfortunately, I was not there long enough to see the lounge, the esports lounge, where like it had like the computers, the PCs, the consoles. It was like really high end stuff. But in 2024, I went to GDC, and a bunch of people that I had never met, like current students, walked up to me and were thanking me for the esports stuff, and I was like, oh snap, I didn't realize that like cat like I just saw it as like, yeah, I'm just, um talking about the games that my friends are playing, and I'm just also like, playing the game and hoping that I'm able to like win at least one match, because I was the tank support um person in our Overwatch team. Um, and it just kind of like grew into a pretty cool program that now even has internships, so and scholarships, sorry, yeah. So people are able to kind of like minor in it in the school, and build a career in esports, which is pretty cool to know.
That's amazing to hear. Like that has to be like the sweetest reward. Like you're not expecting it, you don't see it coming, and they find you're like, hey, I'm deeply involved in something that you built. Like I'm benefiting from something you built, and you're just go. At GDCs, you're probably like running to appointments, you're running around. You're not like expecting these people like, hey, like you basically are changing the course of these people's lives, all because what you're like approached like, hey, are you available? No. Can you do this? Okay. Like that's that. That is so cool. And your whole in hearing about listening to you and hearing about your history, everything, whether it's intentional or not, seems to involve laying that foundation for those to come after you, right? Like making sure that there is a next generation to come after you, to benefit from your experience and your knowledge. And like one of the things I like to tell people about Latinx Games Festival is like, if you find me at a GDC, I'll introduce you to everybody I know. Like I don't gatekeep
Yeah.
connections. Like if they think you're a decent person or you're out there like trying to get it, if you're an executive or you're a student breaking in, like I don't like I'll kick the door open or I'll hold the back door open so you can like sneak in, right? But you're building a foundation in so many parts of the industry in various different levels. I mean, do you ever, because like there's a lot of work that we all do, we don't think about it, and then somebody out of the blue is like, hey, like you did this 5 years ago and I'm benefiting from it. Do you ever have time to like stop and just think about the work that you've done as a whole and the influence that you've had on the industry?
um I feel like I need to have those moments. I think when you're the I know that the industry has been unstable for a long time, right? But being a creative, like the unfortunate reality is like in all of those experiences, I don't ever remember not being in survival mode. Where it's like I am connecting with you, with everyone, and I was putting myself out there because I had to. And so it's one of those where I need to have like that moment where like, oh yeah, you did do that. Like, yeah, like have a get a little treat, get your little latte or something, like celebrating whatever like little or big way you want to, but it's one of those where I do like to kind of like make like a little bit of space to just kind of like let the achievement sink in. Where I think the craziest one was there was a week where I was traveling with family. And then I was in an award ceremony because I was 20 in their 20s for the Harrisburg Young Professionals. Um, and then the next day I was in a conference. And so after that finished, I was like holding like the trophy, which is like downstairs. And I was like, you did that. You won an award. And you also got to connect with your students and introduce them to like some really cool developers. Um, and so I always champion rest. I think there was one moment where I had a student tell me, "You're the first teacher to ever tell me to like rest. Like you were the first teacher to ever like tell me to like take it easy, to like slow down." Where it's like it, I'm teaching a class. This is not a triple A studio I'm leading, right? Where it's like, if you need an extension, if you need some time to polish, just let me know, because I think that we love the medium. Like we grew up with it where like you had the Atari and like your childhood, I had the PlayStation. The games have been a monumental part of our lives, and so like the honor of working in them makes it so that we're more likely to like put our heart and soul in an unhealthy way And I mean, I know that there's plenty of developers and organizations like Take This that have done brilliant work in like addressing burnout and kind of like bringing awareness to it. So when building up these structures, right? Either for like a writer's room where like pretty much it's like, okay, we need documentation, so that everybody can kind of like have a source of truth, or whether it's for a community where like I like making things where and this is gonna sound strange, where I'm replaceable. Like I don't want the esports team to be like Andrea facing, where like I don't want to be the face of something. I want to build things that people can then take ownership over, right? So that there's like a legacy to the projects, legacy to these communities. But it has to be done within like as a marathon and not a sprint. It has to be done like with a pacing, where like we're all kind of like agreeing in like, maybe a few hours of commitment. Like that's how we were able to work in the SIG, where it's like, hey, like Wednesday mornings we have like an hour where we talk about stuff or we meet, and that's it. Because Rome was not built in a day. And that's how I see a lot of these things, where it's like I'm not a heart surgeon, I'm just trying to build things that are lasting. But they don't have to be done that very same night, even if I'm caffeinated as all hell and have the willpower to, where it's like that's a huge part of also like over the years learning kind of like um restrain myself a little bit, just so that I'm able to like sleep 8 hours while doing all these things.
Wow. I mean, rest, which is key, by the way, I think is something that, especially early on when you're trying to break in, you bury that. We somehow figure out a way to like operate on very little sleep or all the caffeine, right?
Mhm.
And because you're on that grind, you're really trying to put yourself out there. Um, to be in your position and actually telling the next generation to rest is essential, because I won't speak for you, but I've known a lot of mentors,
Mhm.
professors, people that like I needed knowledge from,
Yeah.
that would give me like that, like I guess now we dub it like hustle culture, or just like before we would say burnout out loud, like you gotta like work until like your skin burns, right? Like sacrifice sleep, like if you're not getting 3 hours of sleep and doing 5 things at the same time, you're not getting it done. And I'm really happy to see that, maybe someone like you is trying to help the industry move away from it. But there obviously, like, it's been a wild couple of years for the industry.
Yeah.
Jobs disappearing, just never coming back. People, the layoffs, also people being squeezed out of the industry and not coming back because there's, the opportunities are getting slim, and stockholders need another yacht, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I mean, I'm sure all the unspoken things are spoken out loud, but are there any challenges in the industry that you feel doesn't get talked about enough?
Mm, I think something that's on the top of my mind is probably like safety and like this, because to be clear, you mentioned a lot of big issues that the industry has on an ongoing way, and there's a lot of great developers on Blue Sky that also bring awareness to it. One that I don't see talked about as much is safety for developers, and also like just kind of like digital safety, and a little bit of etiquette, wherein where it's like I feel like with social media a lot of people may think that they know me or other like game writers, and so it's one of those where perhaps in light of the pandemic making it so that a lot of the newer generation hasn't had kind of like the day job office kind of like experience, right, where it's just like um just learning how to approach like social interactions in a way that's polite and not transactional, right, where that's something where it's like I know like it's so minor, I feel like, but it can escalate to like somebody reaching out to your private email because you're working in a studio that is hiring, right? Where it's like there's a couple of things where I feel like there needs to be more visibility around like how to connect in a healthy way, because all of like the Ringling stuff, I started in Florida, Central Florida, not Miami, but like there was no studios in Sarasota while I was there. So I had to connect online with a lot of people and build my network from that, and then go to these face-to-face events to kind of like build a little bit more credibility. But I guess just kind of like like democratizing information that like on how to approach people, how to be respectful of boundaries, how to also like not overextend yourself with like networking. I feel like that's something where like we just need to do a little bit of a better job. I feel like also as like mentors, right? Where I feel like you mentioned you might have like mentored and stuff where I try to champion like time management and like just a little bit of social etiquette. Like I'll have my mentees asking me like, is this an okay email? Like, you know, just kind of like things like that. And it's like I I love that because it's like I didn't know all of this. I wasn't born with all of this knowledge, right? But again, I feel like that's such a small one. But like it's an issue. But that's one that I just haven't seen get like a spotlight. Um, um but yeah, I can probably talk for like 2 hours and like what we need more visibility on.
Oh no, trust me, that in itself is like a whole like that could be like a week-long conference in
Right.
itself
I
with you
just
and like three other people, you know, like it is. No, I get it. And I think that's actually a great thing to bring up, especially once again for like the new generation, right? That may not have been exposed to the norms that we might have taken for granted because that's just what we knew. And then that shift in, you know, like, and, you know, and then again, maybe some of the leavings of that, like, gotta get it, you know,
yeah.
culture, like, you may not know the etiquette of like approaching a random stranger or like what violates like you know what violates boundaries, right? Like the blurriness of like you being a very like public person online, right? You have that situation where maybe they're, you know, a parasocial relation where they may feel like they know you, and for the most part they actually may know like your career and what you
Mhm.
put out there, but they don't know you. So I actually think that's like an important thing. And to be honest, in these discussions I haven't heard that brought up once, so actually thank you for bringing it up. We are ending, we're kind of coming up on time here, but you know, you know, this isn't a question, just want to like highlight again the importance of sleep, and you know, other tools to avoid burnout, but obviously like sleep is important. So thank you for bringing that up. That is so essential. Sort of like, you know, this look into the future a bit. What trends in gaming excite you the most right now?
Mm, a couple of trends that I'm seeing in gaming. It's how do I say this without sounding shady? Give me one moment. When studios who say they're narrative driven actually have growing like writing teams, I'm seeing that in conversations there's kind of like um the positioning of story is just kind of like a USP where it's like if we are able to make something but then ensure that kind of like it has kind of like a unique um story that resonates with players, like seeing that I'm seeing like changing attitudes towards like narrative and design. I'm seeing people championing that a lot more than like when I started, where even like I think the first game I ever made with like a client, I didn't even have a role, I was just like the writing person. And so we have since come to kind of like I'm seeing like a lot of indie studios that are like really really putting a lot of effort in incorporating narrative early, incorporating kind of like championing kind of like the marriage of gameplay and story, and not we're either going with one or the other. um so I want to see kind of like more of that grow. Other trends that I'm also seeing, it's um next year there's going to be Future Fest in North Carolina. And this year was the first one of Game Your Future. I'm seeing more events arise as a response to the changes in GDC. I've never worked with GDC directly. I have nothing against their organizers, but as somebody who is based in the East Coast, it is an expensive commitment to go to GDC. And I'm seeing this rise in people that are not just like voicing their concerns towards the San Francisco event, but also creating their own and just kind of like seeing like, let's just grow this East Coast. Let's try to make more events in the Midwest. Let's try to grow our local game industries. And I think that ties into kind of like, if I could kind of like something that I've told my students and anyone that I mentor, it's now's the time to be entrepreneurial. Now is the time to really position yourself in a way where it's like, you create your own games, you go to these events, and you're like, pretty much like promoting your work, almost like a business owner in a way, because there's a lot of growing initiatives to continue investing in this medium. A lot of organizers are working with local governments to see if there's more grants, more opportunities, more showcases for developers to be able to show their work to like wider audiences in the East Coast. And I want us to like have more actions and not just words. I'm in social media quite often, as you may have seen, but I try to actually like do something about what I feel like could be better about the industry. So I always encourage people, like, if you don't want to go all the way to San Francisco, then try supporting or promoting these events. Try promoting kind of like smaller studios and seeing how you can just kind of like say wish list this so that we can see more smaller studios, more experimental games shine, rather than complaining about the status quo, in my opinion.
That's so essential, and I'm happy that you said it, because like one of the goals for Latinx Games Festival was like I wanted to start a conference where we can just collect some of the best minds, talk about games, and oh, they just happen to be like from Latin America, or like I'm a Puerto Rican in New York, so New Yorker here. Like I just wanted to collect smart, awesome people and put them in a space where they didn't have to fly out to San Francisco and book a 7-day hotel. Even a hostel can run you up like $600-$700 for a couple of days. Tickets are like $1,000. If you get it early, maybe you can get it for $800, like, or 20, whatever it is. It's too much. So I'm happy to hear you say like support your I mean, just like your conference, like go to a game jam, right? If you have, it doesn't matter if you have like 2 followers, like retweet or share something, like share what the community is doing and put together, because we really do need to build infrastructures locally so that you can make these same like level connections and build that community with them, and not have it be this, 60,000 person free for all where you're maxing out a credit card and, going broke every year because you're hoping to, get that connection that can land you to the next gig.
It's all about supporting what you want to see more of. Because if you want to see more events in the East Coast, then support these events and promote them. If you want to see more smaller studios be able to kind of like keep making games that you love, then make sure that you're wish listing them. Make sure that you're helping the algorithm, which is free. It is free to retweet. It is it doesn't cost anything to like encourage people to wish list. So that's something that I try to do, where it's like, hey, I noticed that Jason likes WarioWare. Like, let me plug in my friend's kind of like game, where it's like if we kind of like start incorporating these kind of like habits in our ecosystem, then I think that we can see a brighter future in the industry ahead for sure.
That's so awesome. You know what? Let's leave. You're a person of community. You're helping these young minds. You've done a lot of amazing work. If you can leave the audience with one thing, can you give a little bit of advice to someone trying to break into the industry today? What would that be?
you need to be the biggest champion of your own work, where you need to be telling people what it is that you're working on, what, even if it's a game jam, polish that project, present yourself as like, hey, my name is so and so, I'm the creator of such and such. But people need to see what it is that you worked on. People need to see your work, and you need to have faith that your work is good enough, because it's very, very competitive. But just champion your own work and never, never, never stop upskilling. I have worked in, not to brag, right? But it's like, we mentioned a little bit where it's like, I've worked on Civ 7, I have my AAA credit, I work with multiple indie studios. I'm still going through Unreal Engine 5 like tutorials. Like, I'm still actively learning and making my own projects in like Unreal, Godot, Unity, RenPy, RPG Maker, where it's like, because I believe that number one, I love to learn. I love to learn, and then I love to teach. And number two, it just always gives you a way to kind of like have that competitive edge, because if you think that you really want to break into the industry, so do 5,000 other people. And I know that because I have had friends post like hiring, like they're hiring junior narrative designers, and they get 5,000 applications in 3 days. Minimum, I think the lowest I've probably seen is like 700, right? And people have that, like, I don't, I mean, you're writing for games. It's a really appealing job. It's kind of like almost like a rock star kind of thing. But you're seeing like people that have been in Emmy award winning shows wanting to pivot to games. And you need to make sure that you're always upskilling within your means. 1 hour, just spend an hour watching videos like after your shift, because you need to have your needs met before you try to pivot into any change, in my opinion. Once you have your needs met, just spend an hour each night, learning more, learning tools, connecting. There's no need to overextend yourself. But yeah, just kind of be entrepreneurial, continue upskilling, and connect with developers within like your own pace, your own means, and also your own like bandwidth, because not everyone's able to just like jump into a million Discord calls. So whatever networking works best for you, I'd say go for that.
That is great advice, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and knowledge. Where can folks find you if they're trying to connect, or if there's like a cool gig that has your name on it? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can reach out to me via my LinkedIn. I'm always active. And so that's pretty much like the best way to get a hold of me, or Discord, ASARAVIPAPT. So those are two ways to kind of like connect with me. I have my own consultancy where I help with game design, narrative, and world building, where just like how I'm setting up communities, I kind of set up the documentation for other projects. So if you ever need a second pair of eyes, yeah, I'm always available to like help cool projects shine, and just bring more cool games to Steam, itch.io, and beyond. So thank you so much for having me, Jason, by the way.
Thank you, Andrea. This is incredible. What an enlightening conversation. I feel like I've learned not only just more about you, but more about what it takes to, and it's such a cliche term, so like go after the brass ring, or like putting yourself out there in a way that intentionally or not leaves a trail that others can benefit from. So I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to speak with me and to the audience. And thank you everybody for watching this, the 7th annual Latinx Games Festival. My name is Jason Vega, and I'll see you later.